So we'll call the meeting to order at 12:06 p.m. on 5/11. First order of business is to go ahead and approve the minutes from the February 9th, 2022 meeting. I hope you all have time to look at that. What I did notice is that that's all that was sent in the agenda today, and before was just the minutes. So you have really nothing else in here, so I'll be have time to look at it. Can I get a motion to approve February 9th minutes?
Corbin, this is Tony. I would like to move to approve the minutes from February 9th.
Perfect, Tony. Thank you. Any second? Any discussion on it? And then a second?
No discussion, but I'll second Tony's motion to approve the minutes from February 9th.
Cool. All right, with no further discussion on it, can unanimous raise your hand? Yes. Yes.
Aye.
Ayes have it, no nays. Motion approved. Now we are moving on to the informal presentation for 23 fee increases.
Yes, so thank you. The purpose of both parts of the conversation today is really just, I'm not coming to you with necessarily a firm recommendation that I'm asking for a yay or nay on. Mostly just wanted to talk about my thoughts for how we look at the 23 fee increases. Obviously, we didn't do any fee increases last year because we were building the plan for this year with the goal that they would become, the fees would become effective, excuse me, 10/1, as opposed to when they actually became effective was 5/6. So a few months behind schedule, which makes the increase seem odd, but it's still necessary to capture a year of growth of costs. And no matter what metric you look at, what a year of growth it has been. So historically, we've effectively tried to build a construction cost index based on a variety of different indexes that we've swapped in and out year to year. I would say it's the intent was to try to mimic what we were purchasing in the plan. The reality is it was pretty complicated. And because we were changing it from year to year based on, oh, well, there's this new index that seems to track what we want a little bit better. I think, whoops, sorry, I'm just trying to shut the conversation. Oh.
Yeah, we are recording.
Oh, we are, okay.
Yep.
Good, okay. Because I don't know how to do that either. So rather than us kind of piece together these different indices that we think are representative, what most people in Idaho have done, actually, and I think Ann said that it's every single one of our clients, they've switched to this engineering news record index, which tracks a combination of different factors. So it's basically trying to recreate what we did, which is a combination of indices in one, but this one's actually an official index that's put out, and I don't believe that they change it over time. It's been relatively static in terms of its components.
What was it called? Excuse me.
It's the Engineering News Record, enr.com, I believe is the website.
Okay.
But here you can see like what we've done is like the historic metrics, and I've just pulled together some samples of what they were. And so you can see like each one is very different. Some years durable goods were very high, some years it wasn't so high, and it was the non-residential construction component that was very high. I think what you're seeing now is that everything's high, no matter which index that you're looking at. So if we were to use, we'd have to adjust for the exact percentages because these are just averages shown here. But the average of the indices we've used in the past is over 11% for last year. And what's throwing that off too is the employment cost index, which is a small component for parks, not a small component, it is a component for the parks, which wouldn't be as applicable in a year like this, where really the biggest expenditure that we have, it is parks, but it's building that support facility out by the airport, which is not your typical parks construction project. Which gets us into what E&R is. So E&R, and I apologize that this was a repeat here. So E&R basically has two indices. They have the construction cost index and the building cost index. And as you can see, like the components are virtually identical outside of the labor component. And so, and I chatted with our public works folks about this. The way I and they are thinking about it is building cost index is probably more applicable for like building an actual building, like a fire station or the support facilities that I was just referencing, versus using just general labor rates and more of it, which is probably more applicable on the housing, or I'm sorry, on the park side. You know, green up costs, things like that are probably, and you'll see when we get to the index in a second here that the construction cost index tends to be a little bit lower than the building cost index. So here's what these have averaged over time. Sorry, I'm just having to move you guys off the screen here so I can actually see the graph. So for the year ended in December, you can see that the building cost index was substantially higher than the construction cost index. But if you look at the average of the two, it was 10.1. I think that the actual number for the building cost index was around 13. And now, if you look at through April, it's gone up to already be over 14 or 15. So, I mean, it's clear that we're experiencing a lot of escalated costs. And the question really comes down to, is it CCI, is it BCI, or is it a blend? Or I guess the other question is, or do we continue with the kind of our mismatch of indices that we've used in the past?
I have a question.
Sure.
So is this comparing the April 22nd or 2022? Is that from December 21 to April has been 12%?
Oh, sorry. No, I should have clarified. All these are 12-month intervals. So,
Okay, so April to April. Okay. Basically, it's gone 2% higher since. Okay, I got you. Thank you.
wrong direction. So this is just the same data on a rolling 12 months basis. So Corbin, what you were just asking, like all of these stats are given versus the 12-month ago period. So you can see it's actually looking at that year-end stat, and I know it looks like it's January, but it's actually the December 31st value that I have highlighted in red. It's pretty much in the average of where it is. Like it was a little bit higher, it dipped, it's gone up a little bit. But unlike, I remember, Tony, I think it was actually you that pointed out that there was an anomaly in the data that I used in the data 2 years ago, where it just like arbitrarily spiked in December and then went back down. That's why I pulled this slide, is I don't think that same phenomenon happened again, where you're just getting this artificial spike and then it goes back down. Because if anything, we can all agree that it's probably getting worse. So and again, I'm not asking for a formal vote of yay or nay, but just based on what I've told you, does it seem like switching to an E&R index makes sense? Also, do you think it makes sense to track more with the one that is going to be the bulk of our cost, which is the building cost index? I'm sorry, the construction cost index or the building cost index? Again, just to go back, it's that BCI that's higher and is probably more reflective of actual structures. Or, is it a simple average, which is all I've shown here? And I guess the other question would be, or do we look at the 10-year CIP in aggregate and basically say, okay, well, parks projects are in one category, the fire projects and police are different, are different, so get that relative weighting. So it might work out to be 50-50. I honestly have not done the math yet. But just to look at that total 10-year spend and base the relative percentages on the portion that's parks versus other. And again, with the caveat around like parks maintenance facility are gonna be, it's not like a park, we're building buildings. And I guess the final thing, and I believe I have a slide after this, is they do have indices that break out some local geographies, like Denver and Seattle. However, if you look at it, they tend to fluctuate a little bit. Like if you just look at, for example, what's showing as January 2020, probably actually December of 19. But you know, pretty different numbers between the gray bar and the gold bar. The blend, the average is the blue bar. But again, like getting it in the line is just the overall index for that time period. So it seems like we're probably better off not going down the rabbit hole of trying to track to a specific city, because there could be unique circumstances in Denver or Seattle, and neither are Boise. And so it probably seems like the overall index, either BCI, CCI, is probably the way to go, but open to what you all think about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to that slide, you can see, I'm seeing a trend here. So Denver can have a good month where it's lower. Seattle has a higher month, but then they switch the next month, right? So basically they're kind of just delayed a month or two. One's higher and one's lower. The next month it kind of switches 2 months after. So in Jan 20, Denver had a low BCI, but then it spiked January over. So it got higher than both Seattle, so kind of made up for it. So I think going average there isn't problematic. How the data looks to me, at least.
Yeah, no, meaning going more towards that overall index that's gonna be, I forget how many cities they include in their metric, but it's a nationwide set of data rather than any regional data.
And being Boise, I think we're hitting the high end of everything at this point nationwide.
I would argue that there would be a case to be made for whatever the highest one is, just use that.
Just use that one.
And you're not gonna be underestimating. Or over, I mean, yeah, you're probably still underestimating, sorry if I can say it correctly.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Does anybody have any comments? Questions?
Yeah, Corbin, this is Tony. So are we looking then for just some guidance for you? Say, what are we thinking?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess in a perfect world, would be, yes, this seems like a reasonable approach. We'd be supportive of something that would, you know, just blend the two, or is, you know, how to weight them. Or, I mean, the other thing, Corbin, to the point that you were just making on the highest cost, I mean, I don't think it's going, I mean, the fee percentage increases would be very high, but I also don't think it's misleading to use the BCI, which is the higher of the two, because I mean, for years, we've known that we're not having costs, like for years, and somewhere back at the end of the slide deck, I have something that showed our averages, but you know, we've been getting 2 to 3% increases, maybe 4 in a good year. And on the building side, including parks, 5% has been a good year in terms of low inflation. So I don't think that there's a risk of picking an index that's inappropriately high. But just kind of thinking about what you all think.
Mm-hmm.
My inclination would be to be looking at that BCI. The places where we're going to get trapped on our increases are when we go to build fire stations and we go to build the police facilities that they need. And as you said, I think that BCI is going to track those because of the specialty labor that you have. And I want to take a little closer look at it myself, but if you ask me, my gut instinct at this point would be to match the BCI.
And I also apologize, I should have stated this explicitly, like, I know that Nampa in particular, like that is the one that they track. Like it's not ENR combination, it's not, I mean, it's it's the higher building cost index. And I don't know their rationale, although I'm sure we could ask Ann, but I'm guessing it's that exact thing, which is all of our costs are going up double digit every year. Let's try to get something that captures it.
Right.
And I think I'd like to err on the side of caution and go with the higher. Better to overestimate than come up short.
Right, and I think the other thing to that note is, you know, we're in the process, one of the things that came up as we were moving the new plan through approval process was we're potentially going to change one of the park planning area boundaries based on it. So oddly enough, if you look at Harris North and the future Harris East, those are oddly enough in the North River planning area. And so some residents spoke up and said, hey, that could really be a part of Southeast Barber Valley. So all that's going to require us to go back in and tweak growth projections for the two areas. But we will also be able to use that as we're doing that, you know, change cost estimates, thing like that. So I don't view this as like it was 5 years ago, a static shot that we are only doing the annual update price increases every year. I think that we're going to be going in, and to the extent that we have better data, like not just relying on an index. I mean, in some years, yes, we will, but when we can go in and like do a more thorough update, maybe not reevaluate every single project, but just make sure that we're still in the ballpark in terms of what the costs are. So I agree. I don't think there's a risk in, again, overestimating these costs.
Is the ENR updated monthly? I think it is, but
It is.
Is there additional cost to using it versus that the city would use or pay, I'm imagining?
I think it's like $100.
Nice. Nice.
And I believe that they actually found somebody at the city that already had a subscription. So it's not even an incremental $100. It's
$100 is nothing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
10,000 plus, you know, maybe, but 100.
And just because, like, and I apologize, like I didn't label all the data sets in here. So to look at the relative values, CCI, the blue bar at year end 21 was 7.4% versus 13.1. And I think we all can reasonably agree that 7% was not what anybody, like, I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of costs that are coming back. And these are things that we budgeted not even quite a year ago. So last spring, let's just say items that we budgeted, put into the budget. And they're not complicated projects. It's things like a shade structure at a park, $40,000. No, that's going to be $65,000 or $70,000. So I mean, it's just the changes that we've seen are just not percentages, unfortunately. But yeah, so the different, I apologize, I don't recall if I finished giving you the BCI here. So the BCI index for that is 13.1.
Yep. In the current model we have, I think that was the first number you provided at the beginning of this was 11.2% for 21. So is that correct? And that one you have to basically manually calculate. Is that like once a year?
Exactly, and it wasn't precise. It wasn't necessarily telling you what the number would have been because there's different percentages for different departments. So we take like, oh, these two components are what we're using for fire. These two components are what we're using for parks. We're only using this for police because it's only vehicles. So I mean, it was
all over the place.
It was all over the place as opposed to like one clean number that's, you know, independent and verifiable. And the other thing that I like about this index, whichever one, BCI or CCI, is because it's done monthly, it tends to capture things more quickly. And because it also has the steel, concrete, and lumber components, it's really capturing what is driving a lot of the cost increases. Like, you know, I think in a lot of the aggregate ones, especially ones that look nationwide, there isn't a concrete shortage. But when you look at like, certainly our area, but when you have an index that specifically has the cost of concrete as a component of that, you know, you're capturing those costs. And I feel like it's a better index for what we're doing. Again, I tend to agree that the BCI, although the headline number seems eye-popping, I believe it's accurate and probably very representative of what we're gonna see as we actually go to build these projects.
And I would agree. It's eye-popping because inflation is eye-popping at the moment. And it's not that the number is high because it wants to be. It's accurately showing what we are seeing. So I second what Colleen and Tony said. I like the BCI. I'm a big fan of it being monthly as well. I mean, raw data that we can get quickly, easier for the city to compile, faster for us to make a decision on. It's beautiful. So
And I think the other thing that I like about the monthly data is it allows us every year when we do this exercise to make sure that, you know, because I remember when I was presenting that data to you, we didn't yet have the information that showed what it, like, yes, you can look historically and see that it spiked a lot, but what you couldn't see yet was the next quarter's data was going to show that it came back down. And we wouldn't know that until we were already, you know, well through the process of actually implementing the fee increase, as opposed to this, it's real time. I mean, as you can see here, the May numbers are already out.
yeah, no, I was going to say that. I mean, we're at the 11th right now, and you have May's, which would be April's data, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, but the fact it's already out,
Yes.
that's good time.
I pulled this data like late April, and so they already had it. But yeah, it just seems much more timely. So I will modify this presentation and put together a memo asking for the formal amount of 13.1 for the year-end number at the next meeting. But I appreciate all the feedback, and this has been helpful in thinking through how we want to go forward. And then the only other thing that I had to talk about today is I just wanted to quickly review next year's, meaning fiscal 23's impact fee funded projects. So just a couple of notes as a standard disclaimer. Most of these numbers are based on what's in the report that Ann put together, basically last summer's values. So this isn't necessarily what would be reflected by the cost increases we just discussed. Also hasn't gone through city council, which might tweak the numbers. Obviously, they're not tweaking the amounts from impact fees, but it might change the overall dollars of projects. So with that disclaimer, there's on the park side, we've got a couple of projects for this year, and I've broken them down by planning area and whether they're happening as planned in the impact fee plan or if they're being delayed. And just although no one from Parks is here, I think that that's actually a pretty good explanation of why things are being delayed. We've had not insignificant turnover at Parks. Obviously, Jennifer is no longer with us, who developed most of this plan. So a couple of the projects that we had hoped to get started, we just don't have the bandwidth to actually feasibly move on this year. Supply chain delays. The focus has been on clearing projects that, for example, the Julia Davis restroom, which I think was budgeted for the first time, maybe back when I was an infant, but that might be a slight exaggeration. It was certainly over 5 years ago, joking aside. So the focus has been on clearing a lot of projects like that versus adding more kind of optimistic projects that we're not going to get to or are just going to sit on the book. So for this year, for fiscal 23, there are 3 regional parks, and the amounts shown are just the amounts in the impact fee plan. The only thing that warrants a brief note is on parks maintenance. That's actually in for 1.6 million, but we took 500,000 of that in under the 22 budget because there was also spelled out in the old impact fee plan. So I have not added that to the 1.5 that's in this plan. It's just effectively we're just getting that 1.1 million incremental amount. And then on the vehicle side, that's not tied to a specific vehicle. It's just the 230 grand that we got over 10 years. It's just taken a tenth of it this year. And I expect I'll do the same thing every year. Central Bench is getting Bora Park and North River is getting Magnolia and Gary Lane. On the delayed side, there is that Barber Valley Greenbelt connection that doesn't really make sense outside of the Alta Harris Park. So it certainly doesn't make sense to do that now. I know that there are conversations ongoing with all the stakeholders for Alta Harris in terms of the precise timing. But I can definitively say that the Greenbelt connection doesn't need to be budgeted for next year. I'm not making any statement on when Alta Harris might happen. Just clearly the Greenbelt connection isn't going to happen. Likewise, McDevitt Sports Complex is delayed. Property acquisition in the central bench and the micro park on the west bench is being delayed. Just again, as we mentioned, like we've got to focus on the planning efforts for the ones that are above the line here, and then some of these have just been pushed out a year unless will be reevaluated in the 24 budget build. So that's it on parks. On Northwest Station, the current plan is that there's going to be, it's nearly a $13 million project all in, which includes some space for officers. So a portion of the project will be funded by a portion of the growth for officers that we put in the plan. So that's about $1 million of it. 10.4 in aggregate will have come from fire impact fees, 1 million from police impact fees. Some of that was previously budgeted on the fire side. So the incremental add is that 9.55 that you see on the screen that would be adding to the impact fee revenue, what I call revenues from the city's perspective this year. That space for officers, I believe it's about 8 or 9% of the overall square footage is what they're setting aside for the police officers. So we just said, all right, if the total square footage is X and they're getting however many percentage of it, that works out to be how many square feet times the number that was in the report that Ann put together to come up with that $1 million. The other thing that's also related to the Northwest Station is the engine for that station. That's in the plan at 780. That is not going to be adequate to actually cover the cost, but it'll probably be pretty close once we apply the inflation adjustment. So that is the plan there. And then on the police side, the strictly police side, the mobile command vehicle that was budgeted or that was in the plan, they'd like to get that in 23. Technically, this fund, because of the micro district, is still in the red. However, the capital fund, the city's capital fund, is in a position to advance those monies. So it's not spending into a deficit. It's just going to owe the city more, which now that we have these higher fees, shouldn't take as long to pay off. And then total cost, like I said, be about $500,000, with the impact fee portion would be $400,000, which will also be adjusted by the annual inflation amount. So when I come back to you next month, I'll do a brief summary on the inflation amounts and also translate that into what it means for the projects in 23. And in the interest of not getting overly precise on the numbers, I will probably round them to the nearest 1,000 or something like that. So it's not, well, we're getting $783,000.12 for this particular engine, or whatever the math works out to be. So that is all I had in terms of comments on next year's plan. Are there any questions on projects that are in, that are out, or anything else for that matter?
Any questions? Michael, you unmuted. You got anything?
No, I was just gonna thank Travis for his time and going over everything with us.
I do have a question going back to the inflation record, I guess, what index we would end up using. So if we go with BCI and then in the future we realize Boise's not following that, as closely anymore. It's getting closer to the construction cost, ECI, for the overall. Are we able to switch pretty
Yes.
easily? Or
So unlike Nampa, and I'm trying to see if I can actually find it in my email here, and I'm not sure if, because Ian sent me a snippet of their actual, and I don't know if it was their code or their impact fee report. But either way, because ours is just referencing annual inflationary adjustments, like we have in the past, we're free to find a different index if we find that this one is no longer working for us. Simply because it's not in code, it doesn't say that we have to use ENR or any other index for that matter. It's subject to y'all's thinking and view on what's the most applicable.
perfect. Well, that was my only question.
Oh, and just to circle back, one thing that Sarah noted, that she had made a point that for me to mention a lot of the, sorry, Sarah Arkle made for me to, talk about the cost increases, product shortages, but I think we spent enough time on that. But the one thing she did reference, since I talked about Julie Davis restroom, we finally got the permit. So we're finally going to start rolling on that one after however many decades that's been.
Good to hear. Well, guess this will be a short meeting if that's it. No one has anything else. I will say that, yes, I'm excited for the city to get a new index that's going to be easier for them and faster for us to track. That is efficient. I'm all about efficiencies. So, and having monthly data like that is, again, fantastic. So it gives us ability to react faster to what's going on. And again, raising the fees aren't because we want to. We're going to be in a deficit. So it's not like we have a choice.
Unfortunately,
What we're trying to build. So it's not creating surpluses for us.
yeah, no, it's minimizing deficits.
Exactly. So. All right. Well, short meetings are always good. So if we have nothing else here, I can get a motion to adjourn.
I could move that we adjourn the meeting for the day.
Cool. Can I get a second?
I'll second the motion.
Awesome. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
No nays. So that's it. And I'll adjourn the 5:11 meeting. Look forward to the next one where we actually are going to are we going to be voting on?
Yes, that would be the plan, is next in June, at the beginning of June, to actually vote on recommending those fee increases so that it can be included in our fee increases for the year, because there's a whole nother public hearing process needed because it's over 5%. So in past years, I think we've been able to just include it in our budget book and that's it. Like that satisfies the hearing for increased fees, but because they're higher this year, we'd have to have a separate public hearing on that in July I believe it would be in July. So we need to keep that ball rolling.
Let's hope we don't have to do another one next year.
Yeah,
Over 5%.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that the options are inflation or recession. I don't know which one I'd rather have.
Yeah.
What are we what are we seeing for the summer schedule for meetings? And so, I mean,
Sounds like June for sure.
yeah.
June for sure. Then I honestly don't think there's going to be anything that pressing. I mean, until it comes out of nowhere and becomes pressing. Anything that pressing. The next thing is going to be, like I alluded to, that change of the park planning area boundary. I'm sure that we want to discuss that. But that's, like I said, it's relatively simple. It's just making sure that the Harris Ranch adjacent properties are included in the southeast. But that, candidly, we're probably several months away from that. So that would probably be late summer, best case, because we would have to go to DFAC and have to go through planning and zoning. There's a big process involved, so it's not gonna happen anytime soon, even though we're continuing to advance that.
Cool. Well, then we'll see in June and then maybe August or September. We'll see how it goes.
All right, thank you.
All right, everybody.